Reading literature is more than just comprehending what happens. When you read literature, you must think deeply about the text. Golden Lines is a routine that asks students to note or highlight golden lines. Lines are short passages from a text that lead the reader to a deeper understanding of the author's theme or are particularly meaningful to them for some reason. This is a protocol you can use with any text that you read or any presentation that you watch, but it is especially important when reading literature. When writing golden lines, you begin by identifying, as you read, passages that seem important or emotionally evocative to you. Don't think too deeply about them at first. Instead, rely on your instinctual reaction. It is always best to select several passages and then decide which one or ones to use later. When you write the passage, follow this format: character being quoted, and the person being addressed, and the passage in quotation marks. When choosing a passage, make sure that it is in complete sentences. And it is best if it is a relatively short passage, 3 lines or less. Finally, it's a good idea to type the quotation out rather than cut and paste it. Typing the quotation forces you to pay close attention to the words and the way the words are put together. It will enhance your understanding of the passage. For this particular PowerPoint presentation, I want to use the passage from Everyday Use by Alice Walker. The passage is told by Mama, who is the narrator of the story, to the reader. And she writes, or she says, Maggie will be nervous until after her sister goes. She will stand hopelessly in corners, homely and ashamed of the burned scars down her arms and legs, eyeing her sister with a mixture of envy and awe. Next, you want to pay attention to key words and terms within the passage. Words are the author's currency. They choose them carefully and use them with purpose. Pay close attention to the words and phrases used in the passage. Look for words that you don't know. Even if you think you know what a key word means, look it up anyway. It may have been used because it has multiple meanings. Look for words that hold lots of connotative or emotional meaning, or that the author has used repeatedly throughout the text. These are words that you want to highlight and annotate in the text. For example, in Walker's story Everyday Use, the character Maggie is described early in the story as homely. Initially, one would think about this description as being unattractive, perhaps even ugly. But if we look up the word, we can see that Walker is telling us so much more about this important character. Homely can also mean being something familiar with, which a person is comfortable and at ease, free from affectation, unaffectedly natural, simple, not elaborate or complex. All of these definitions apply to the definition of Maggie's character. Once you have analyzed keywords and terms, you want to analyze the passage by taking notes on these keywords and terms. Write briefly about what a word that you have chosen means to you when removed from the quote and the context of your reading. Just think about that term all by itself. What does it usually mean? How would you use it in a sentence? Write those down next to the word. Then think about the connotations or emotional meanings of the word. What feelings or ideas is invoked by the word? For example, thinking about the passage that we just looked at, I identified she will stand hopelessly in corners, homely. As I think about that word, I think that it may be that Maggie is unattractive. In fact, it's quite likely that she is, since she is covered with burn scars. But it may also be that Maggie is seen as homely because she doesn't put on airs. She doesn't try to be something that she isn't. As a result, people feel comfortable around Maggie. It's quite likely that at first sight people might discount her, but as they get to know her, they realize that there is true beauty underneath that plain exterior. Also, when I consider the connotations of the word used, I think homely doesn't mean unattractive or ugly, but it is a very mild adjective. We use the word homely when a person is being when the person being described is generally liked or respected, but their physical appearance is judged as lacking. You might also want to jot down the meanings of each word as notes, and these connotations will help you better understand what the words mean in the context of the slide. For example, let's take a look at the second part of the passage. The quote continues, "And ashamed of the burn scars down her arms and legs, eyeing her sister with a mixture of envy and awe." As I read this portion of the quotation, I ask myself, how does this statement clarify Maggie's homely appearance? Could the physical scars impact the way she presents herself to the world? Why would she be ashamed of something that she could not control? And what does she envy about her sister? Why is she in awe of her sister? What does this statement tell us about the relationship between Dee and Maggie? Once I've looked at the portions of the passage, it's time to take my notes and put them together. When you've analyzed the passage, you should have a series of notes. Below each series of notes, summarize them by writing one key term, the plus symbol, another key term, and then write how the meaning of each word changes in context to each other. For example, after I have looked at the passage about Maggie, I might then start to take my notes and put them together. And it might look like something like this. For instance, Maggie's outward appearance does not reflect her true value. She has been made to feel insecure and worthless because of the scars that cover her arms and legs. And she has also been judged in comparison or against her sister, who is always considered to be more beautiful and important. This is what we understand about what the author is saying in that quotation. She doesn't say it directly, obviously, but she says it through the use of her words and the way that the ideas are put together. You're now ready to begin writing your explanation, but before you do that, you need to put the passage into context. Briefly put the quotation into context by telling the reader who is saying the quote, to whom it is being said, and what is happening to prompt the quotation. Oftentimes when you write golden lines or when you quote something in an analysis paper, the reader of your reflection has not read the original story. So it's important that you put the quotation in context. So for this particular quotation, I would start by saying who is the person saying it. Mama, the narrator of the story, describes for the reader. Perhaps Mama was talking to somebody else, but she's not. She's talking to you as the narrator. Describes for the reader her daughter Maggie. Both Mama and Maggie are awaiting a visit of her other daughter Dee, who left home from Boston and has not returned in many years. Now this kind of sets the background for the description and why Maggie is waiting, nervous, and insecure. Now it's time to put it all together in an explanation. Begin your explanation with the person responsible for the passage and the person that is receiving the passage. For example, Mama, the narrator of the story, tells the reader. Now you're going to paraphrase the quotation by putting together all of the connotative and definitive meanings that you have extracted from the key terms in the phrases and explaining how they impact the message of your quotation. You're going to see that your paraphrase or explanation looks quite a bit different than the actual quotation. because you're telling me what the author is saying in that passage, not what the author says. Those are two different things. For example, I might write, Mama, the narrator of the story, gives the reader insight into the character of Maggie by describing her as she waits for her sister Dee to arrive for a visit. Dee left home for Boston and has not returned for a number of years, and Maggie is described as being clearly nervous. Mama describes a young woman whom outsiders may see as unattractive, but who is actually a true beauty underneath her plain exterior. It is clear that Maggie is insecure both because of the scars she bears on her arms and legs, but also because of her relationship with her sister Dee. It is clear that Maggie believes that she is a reflection of how she looks and that she has always been second to her more successful sister. Phew, that felt like a lot, right? But guess what? You've just explained a quotation so that anyone, even someone unfamiliar with the text, can understand its meaning and significance. Explaining quotations is difficult, but it becomes easier with practice. By the end of the semester, you should be able to do this without having to painstakingly move through the steps. Now comes the most important part, your reflection on the quotation. In complete grammatical sentences, you need to reflect on why the passage is meaningful to you. You need to be specific and concrete in your reflection, and you must apply the passage to you specifically. In your reflection, you should answer one or more of the questions below. Can you find yourself responding to the passage with some sort of strong emotion? If so, what is it, and why do you think you may be feeling this way? Can you identify with the text's central idea or the information it's sharing? Why? How? Be specific and concrete in your answer. Have you had any experiences like those being described? Can you identify with the story? Explain your answer with specific and concrete details. What questions do you have about the passage? What questions about the life did the passage cause you to have? Why? Once again, you won't answer all of these questions. You might answer only one. You might answer a number of them, but it is extremely important that your reflection be related to you specifically. For example, this is my reflection on the quotation that we've been working on throughout the video. This passage caught my attention the moment I read it because of the use of the word homely. I was in London when Jimmy Carter was president. In one of the newspapers, I read an article that led with Jimmy Carter and his homely wife, Rosalind. I was offended that a national newspaper would call the First Lady homely, until it was explained to me that in England, homely meant welcoming, unassuming, homelike. In England, I was told, homely is a compliment. When I read Walker's description of Maggie, that experience came to mind, and I began to wonder, what if Walker really meant to compliment Maggie? What if both were true, that she was both unattractive but welcoming, beautiful? As I continued to read the story, I realized that all of the definitions of homely applied to Maggie, and I could see how Walker was pointing out that flashy is not always better. As a result, I took more care to try to recognize that quiet, unassuming people make important contributions too. Okay, moving forward, this is what you're going to do to write golden lines. Follow the steps until you become comfortable with the process, and then at that point it should be easy for you to address the golden lines that you're assigned throughout the semester. Good luck.